A woman kneels in a stone courtyard outside Jerusalem, grinding something green between two rocks. She is not making dinner, she is making medicine, and the plant in her hands, Hyssop, would go on to be named 11 times across the Hebrew Bible, used everywhere from doorposts on the night of the Exodus to the cleansing rituals for skin disease in Leviticus. That is what we're going to do. I am going to walk you through every healing herb named in the Torah, in the order they appear, and see what each one actually treated, why God commanded it, and why it still matters to your health right now. Quick aside before we start, everything I'm about to walk you through here is really just the tip of it. There is a guide that collects this Hyssop story and about 30 more like it, remedies from the Talmud and the Jewish kitchen that never even made it into a Torah verse. You can check the link in the description and pinned comment, or scan the code on your screen now to find out more about it, and also get lifetime access into the Rambam's Inner Health community, where I share free health tips like this one you are about to watch. For now, let's go back to that courtyard outside Jerusalem. Please like, share, and subscribe. 1. Bdellium. Genesis chapter 2. Before Adam names a single animal, before the woman is formed, before there is a serpent, a tree, or a single sin to atone for, the Torah stops the story completely to describe geography. A river flows out of Eden and splits into 4 heads. One of them, the Pishon, winds through a land called Havilah, and right there, in the middle of paradise, before anything has gone wrong, the Torah's first recorded act of specificity isn't a commandment, it's an inventory. Genesis 2:11 through 12 names exactly 2 things worth mentioning from that land: gold and something called Bdellium. And for a very long time, nobody was entirely sure what that word even meant. Some translations render it as a gemstone, others call it a gum. Here's the actual text. The gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone. That word, bedolach, comes from a Hebrew root meaning to separate or to divide, the same root behind the word for a divorce document. Botanists have traced the substance itself to a resin, the hardened amber sap that oozes out when you cut into a commiphora tree, the same genus that produces myrrh. Think of it like a scab, but on a tree. When the bark is wounded, the plant seals itself with this thick, fragrant resin, and ancient people quickly noticed that if it could seal a tree's wound, it could help seal a human one. And here's what almost nobody realizes: that resin contains compounds called glucosterones, which modern research shows actively block the inflammatory signals your body sends to a swollen joint or an open wound. The same plant family is still sold today. Google. In health stores, marketed for joint pain and inflammation, the very first specific named substance in the entire Torah, listed before Adam and Eve even have a plot, is a natural anti-inflammatory scientists are still studying 4,000 years later. The Torah's first noun isn't a rule, it's a remedy. 2. Fig. 1 chapter later. Genesis 3. The fruit has already been eaten. Adam and Eve's eyes are opened, but not in the way the serpent promised. They don't feel like God. They feel exposed. And for the first time in human history, 2 people feel a specific, physical, urgent need to cover their own skin. Genesis 3:7 puts it plainly. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. They didn't reach for the nearest broad leaf. The Hebrew word used for what they made, chagora, doesn't mean outfit. It means a girdle, a wrap, something functional and close to the body. This isn't fashion. It's humanity's first bandage, sewn together in a moment of panic, not humanity's first outfit. And here's what almost nobody catches. The fig they grabbed wasn't a random plant. Fig latex contains an enzyme called physin, which breaks down damaged and dying skin tissue, the same mechanism doctors now call debridement. Centuries later, in a story you'll find further along in Scripture, a fig poultice is what heals King Hezekiah's fatal boil. The plant that covers humanity's first shame is the same one that later closes humanity's wounds. In the middle of the first crisis in human history, the plant they reached for in a panic happened to be the one built to heal skin. That's not decoration, that's design. Next is the Flood to Abraham Run. Gopher wood, olive, grape, wheat. 4 chapters, 4 plants. And the story moves fast here, so watch closely, because the Torah is about to blow through an entire arc of human history in a single breath. Genesis 6:14. God tells Noah exactly what to build the ark from. Gopher wood. Not just any timber, a cypress family wood saturated with natural terpenes, the same chemical class that makes modern essential oils antimicrobial. Translation: God specified a wood that resists rot and repels insects for a boat that had to hold every land animal on Earth, sealed shut for over a year. That's not a random material choice, that's engineering. Genesis 8:11. The flood recedes, and the dove comes back to Noah's hand, holding one thing, an olive leaf. It's the most famous symbol of hope in the Bible, but it's also the first appearance of the plant that will anoint every priest, every king, and every sacred object for the rest of the Torah. Olive oil, rich in oleic acid, is an antiseptic and a skin regenerator. The symbol of peace and the ancient world's most reliable healing salve are the exact same plant. Genesis 9:20. Noah plants a vineyard, and this story turns dark fast. Noah gets drunk, exposes himself, and a family fractures. But even here, buried inside the shame, wine's ethanol content made it one of the only reliable antiseptic washes in the ancient world for cleaning an open wound. Genesis 18:6. 3 strangers arrive at Abraham's tent, and he tells Sarah to grind fine flour, soleth, into bread, fast. That same fine flour, mixed with water or oil, was also used as a poultice to soothe burns and skin irritation. Hospitality and healing, made from the same bowl. 4 plants. 1 flood, 1 family, and we're not even out of Genesis yet. Next, Ladanum, myrrh, and Balm of Gilead. Genesis 37. Joseph is 17, favored, hated for it, and his brothers have just thrown him into a pit. While they're deciding whether to kill him outright, they look up and see a caravan approaching, traders headed to Egypt. Genesis 37:25 describes exactly what those traders are carrying: camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. 3 plants, named in the same breath as Joseph's own sale into slavery: lot, ladanum, an astringent antimicrobial resin used on skin lesions; true myrrh, a local anesthetic and pain reliever still used in oral hygiene today; and Torah, the balm of Gilead, a resin so effective at stimulating circulation and sealing wounds that it becomes the ancient world's benchmark medicine. Centuries later, the prophet Jeremiah will ask, almost as an insult, "Is there no balm in Gilead?" Because everyone already knew the answer was supposed to be yes. Here's what most people miss. Those traders weren't hauling luxury goods. They were hauling first aid. And Joseph, sold for 20 pieces of silver into that exact caravan, disappears into Egypt, surrounded by the very substances used to treat wounds, while carrying one of his own that will never fully close. Fast forward to Genesis 43:11. Famine has hit. Jacob, still believing Joseph is dead, sends his remaining sons back to Egypt to beg for grain, and tells them to bring a gift for the mysterious Egyptian official in charge. The list he gives them: balm, honey, spices, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. The exact same medicine chest that watched his son get sold is now being carried back into Egypt as a peace offering, sent unknowingly to that same son, now the second most powerful man alive. The plants don't just heal skin in this story. They bookend a 20-year wound in an entire family. and they're the ones sitting in the room when it finally closes. So let's take a breath and look at where we've been. Because we've only made it through one book, and the Torah has already handed us 10 different remedies. We started with Bdellium, the resin named before Adam and Eve even had a story, still sold today as an anti-inflammatory. Then the fig leaf, not an outfit, a bandage, sewn together in a moment of panic by two humans who'd never needed one before. Then a 4-plant sprint through the flood, gopher wood built to resist rot for over a year at sea, an olive branch that became both a peace symbol and a healing oil, wine used to disinfect wounds, and fine flour ground into a burn poultice for 3 strangers at Abraham's tent. And finally the caravan that carried Joseph into slavery, loaded with the exact same medicine, Ladanum, myrrh, and the Balm of Gilead, that his own father would later send back into Egypt as a peace offering, alongside almond oil for dry skin and pistachios for gut health, not knowing he was sending it straight to his lost son. 10 remedies, 1 book, and we haven't even left Genesis behind for good. If you're catching how deliberately this all lines up, a plant showing up at the exact moment someone needs it, book after book. That's not a coincidence, and it's exactly why this channel exists. If you want the rest of this walkthrough in order, all the way to Deuteronomy, hit subscribe now so you don't lose your place. It genuinely helps this channel keep making these. Next up, we leave Genesis behind and step into Exodus, where the plants stop healing individuals one at a time and start healing an entire nation at once. Everything up to this point has been one family. What comes next is bigger, a shift from healing individuals to healing an entire nation, starting at a bush that shouldn't be burning. Exodus 3:2. Moses is tending sheep on the far side of the desert, decades removed from Egypt, when he sees flames coming out of a bramble bush that never actually burns up. Most people stop at the miracle and move on, but botanically, that bush is Sna, identified as Rubus sanctus, the same bramble family as blackberries, and its leaves and roots are loaded with tannins, compounds still used today to accelerate wound healing. God doesn't call Moses from a cedar, a palm, or anything grand. He calls him from the plant ancient people already reached for when they were bleeding. The location of the calling is itself a message. Healing is about to come from the most humble, thorny place imaginable. And then, months later, the plant from our opening scene finally gets its full moment. Exodus 12:22. The night before the Exodus, God gives Moses exact instructions. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood of the lamb, and strike it on the lintel and 2 doorposts. Not a priest, not a prophet, every single Israelite household head becomes, for one night, their own healer, applying a plant with real antimicrobial compounds, carvacrol, at the exact threshold of their home, in the exact ritual gesture that keeps death from crossing in. Here's what most people miss. This is the same plant that will show up again and again for the rest of the Torah, cleansing lepers in Leviticus, purifying the unclean in Numbers, always at the boundary between sickness and health, always doing the same job. Hyssop doesn't just heal skin. In the Torah, it marks the line itself, a bush that doesn't burn, a doorpost that death doesn't cross. Same family of plant, same message. Some remedies are also boundaries. You know that hyssop plant I opened with? The one the woman was grinding in that stone courtyard? Here's something I didn't tell you yet. Most of the za'atar sitting in spice jars right now, in kitchens all over the world, isn't even the real plant. What the Talmud actually recommended, Shabbat 109b, for intestinal ailments, was a specific herb, Origanum syriacum, and commercial producers substitute it with common oregano so often that most people have never once tasted the real thing their ancestors used as medicine. I only know that because of a guide called the Rambam Healing Bible. 60+ entries like this one, each tracing a food straight from the Talmud and the Torah into what modern research now says about it. Hyssop's just one entry. There's a whole one on the 6 spices from Exodus 30, one on the pomegranate from the high priest's robe, one on wormwood the sages used but modern science says to be careful with. And buying it also gets you into something called the Rambam's Inner Circle, a private group where I share new remedies and findings every week, for life, no extra cost. Links in the description, it's pinned in the comments, or scan the QR code on your screen right now. Next, date palm and coriander. 3 days after that hyssop-marked night, the miracle already feels like it's failing. Exodus 15. The Israelites are free, but they're in the wilderness, and the water at Marah is bitter, undrinkable. God shows Moses a tree. He throws it into the water, and the water turns sweet. A few verses later, in 1527, they arrive at Elim, 12 springs, and 70 date palms. The number isn't decoration. 12 tribes, 70 elders, water and shade, waiting for them at the exact moment they needed it most. Date honey, dvash, wasn't just food. Its sugar concentration is high enough to actively inhibit bacterial growth, which is why it was used on infected wounds long before anyone understood germ theory. Then, Exodus 16:31, the food itself runs out, and something strange starts appearing on the ground every morning, thin, flaky, and the Torah reaches for the closest comparison it has. It tasted like wafers made with honey, and looked like coriander seed. That's not a throwaway detail. Coriander seed contains linalool, a compound with real spasmolytic and carminative effects. It calms digestive cramping. God didn't just feed a starving nation. He fed them something whose closest earthly comparison was already known as a stomach remedy, for people who'd just gone from famine to a completely new diet overnight. Bitter water made sweet. Bread that resembled medicine. Here's what most people miss. Every single complaint in this stretch of the wilderness, thirst, hunger, and eventually skin and digestive distress, gets answered with a plant equipped to solve that exact physical problem. This isn't a nation being kept alive by accident, it's being kept alive by design. Next, the 6 sacred spices, Exodus 30. Moses is still on the mountain, and the instructions have shifted from survival to something more intimate, how God wants to smell. Verses 23 through 34 lay out a formula, ingredient by ingredient, for 2 sacred blends, the anointing oil that will consecrate every priest and every vessel in the tabernacle, and the incense that will burn before God twice a day, every day, for centuries. 6 plants. Not chosen randomly, each one solving a different physical problem, stacked together like a compound remedy. Sweet cinnamon, a circulation stimulant with aggressive antifungal power. Sweet cane, neh bosem, a mild sedative for the nervous system and a digestive tonic. Cassia, warming, broad-spectrum antiseptic. Stacked, a resinous expectorant that protects the respiratory tract. Galbanum, a bronchial antispasmodic that also disinfects the air itself when it's burned. And frankincense, levana, a potent anti-inflammatory that blocks the same leukotrienes doctors target today, and, separately, an anxiety reducer. Here's what most people miss. This isn't a perfume recipe. Line them up and you've covered skin, gut, lungs, nerves, inflammation, and mood. Nearly every major system in the human body, blended into one substance and placed at the center of Israel's holiest space. God didn't just want the tabernacle to smell sacred. He built, into its very air, a pharmacy that every priest breathed in every single day he served. The most important room in the ancient world ran on incense you could also use to treat a cough. Next, cedar wood, Leviticus 14, and this is the most feared diagnosis in the ancient world. Zara'at, often translated leprosy, though it covered a range of skin diseases, didn't just make you sick, it made you unclean. A person diagnosed with it was sent outside the camp entirely, cut off from family, from worship, from everyone, until a priest declared them clean again. It was a medical condition and a social death sentence at the same time. Leviticus 14:4 lays out exactly what the priest requires for the cleansing ritual: 2 birds alive and clean, and cedar wood, and scarlet, and hyssop. Cedar wood, Erez, the heartwood of Cedrus libani, the same tree that would later frame Solomon's temple, is dense with sesquiterpenes, compounds that act as genuine fungicides and bactericides. This wasn't a symbolic prop chosen for its grandeur. It was, quite literally, a medicated wash applied to skin during the exact ritual that determined whether a person could rejoin their own community. Here's what most people miss. Cedar and hyssop show up together in this ritual for a reason. Cedar disinfects, hyssop applies. One is the medicine, the other is the tool that delivers it. The same pairing from the doorposts in Egypt, now used to bring someone back inside instead of protecting someone within. The plant that helped a nation survive its first night of freedom is the same plant that helps one isolated person return to everyone they love. Being unclean in the Torah was never just spiritual. It had a treatment, and the treatment was botanical. Being sent outside the camp, cut off from everyone you love because of something happening to your own skin. That's not an easy thing to sit with, even a few thousand years later. But there's something almost tender in what the Torah does right after that. It doesn't leave the diagnosis as the end of the story. It gives a plant, a process, and a way back in. If you've stayed with me this far into the walkthrough, you're not the average viewer. Most people scroll past a video like this in the first 10 seconds. You didn't. You're already the kind of person who's curious about what actually worked before there were pharmacies, which probably means some part of you is tired of treating symptoms as they pop up instead of getting at what's actually going on underneath. That's the gap. The Rambam Healing Bible was written to close. It's over 60 of these entries, Maimonides' own prescriptions, plus Talmudic remedies, plus the Sephardic and Ashkenazi kitchens that kept this knowledge alive for 1,000 years after him, covering joint pain, heart health, blood sugar, gut health, skin, sleep, mental clarity. Organized by symptom, not alphabetically, so if your knees ache tonight, you can find the relevant entry in under 2 minutes instead of digging through a book. And here's the part that isn't really about the PDF at all. When you get it, you're also led into the Rambam's inner circle, a running, living group where new findings and remedies get shared weekly. It's not a newsletter sitting in a folder. It's a conversation that keeps happening whether you're in the room for it or not, and every week you're not in it is a week of that knowledge you don't get back. You already know what happens next if you don't act now. You close this tab, you mean to come back to it later, and later doesn't come. So ask yourself honestly what it costs you to not have this on hand for the next 10 years of your health versus one link, right now. It's in the description, it's pinned in the comments below, or scan the QR code on your screen. Grab it before you forget. That's the thread running through every single one of these case studies so far. 12 remedies deep, and we're still only in Leviticus. If you've made it this far, you already know this channel isn't skimming the surface. If you want the rest of this walked through, Numbers, Deuteronomy, all the way to the final and most surprising plant on the list, now's the moment to hit subscribe, so you don't lose your place before we get there. We're heading into the wilderness generation next. And the plants get more practical, more everyday. The kind you might actually have in your kitchen right now. Next, barley. Numbers chapter 5. And this ritual is uncomfortable to read even now. A husband suspects his wife of infidelity, with no proof, only jealousy, and the Torah builds an entire legal process around resolving it. Numbers chapter 5 verse 15 specifies exactly what he brings as the offering that sets the whole procedure in motion. An offering of barley meal. He shall pour no oil upon it, nor put frankincense thereon, for it is an offering of jealousy. No oil, no frankincense. deliberately stripped of anything associated with celebration or fragrance. Barley itself, seora, was already understood as the food of the poor and the animal, coarser and cheaper than wheat. The choice of grain was itself an accusation, humbling before anything is even proven. But barley wasn't chosen only for what it wasn't. It's rich in beta-glucans, soluble fiber compounds that regulate blood sugar and actively lower cholesterol, still studied in clinical nutrition research today. The grain used to shame a woman in an unresolved dispute is also one of the more genuinely nourishing staples in the ancient diet. Here's what most people miss. This is the same barley that shows up back in Ruth, offered by Boaz to a vulnerable widow with nothing but kindness attached to it. Same plant, opposite emotional register. Humiliation in one story, provision in another. The grain doesn't change, the hand offering it does. Next. The Egyptian cultivars, leek, onion, garlic, melon and cucumber, Numbers 11. And this is the wilderness generation at its most human, not rebelling against God directly, just exhausted and homesick for food. Numbers 11 verse 5 records the complaint word for word. We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic, 5 plants, named by people who are, technically, being fed by miracle bread every single morning. This isn't a nutritional deficiency. It's grief for a life that's gone, dressed up as a craving. But look closer at what they're actually craving, and the complaint stops being petty. Garlic contains allicin, a compound with genuine antimicrobial and cardiovascular benefits. Onion is loaded with quercetin, an anti-inflammatory antioxidant. Leeks support liver detoxification. Cucumbers and melons are both over 90% water. In a desert, that's not a snack, that's rehydration. Every single item on this list of just missing home is also a documented functional remedy. Here's what most people miss. God doesn't answer this complaint with more manna. Numbers 11:31 tells us He sends quail instead. Meat, the one thing actually missing from a diet of bread and water. The people asked for vegetables and remembered comfort. What they actually needed was protein, and that's precisely what arrived. Even inside a story about complaining, the Torah is quietly diagnosing what the human body is really asking for. Homesickness turned out to have a nutrition label. Next, line aloes Numbers 24. And the man delivering this line is supposed to be cursing Israel, not blessing it. Balaam is a hired prophet, paid by a hostile king to curse the Israelite camp from a mountaintop overlook. 3 times he opens his mouth to curse them. 3 times something else comes out instead. Numbers 24:6 captures the moment his intended curse collapses into praise. He looks down at the camp and compares it to, "The valleys are they spread forth, as gardens by the river's side, as the trees of ling aloes which the Lord hath planted." Ahalim, ling aloes, almost certainly refers to agarwood, the dense, fragrant resin produced by aquilaria trees when they're wounded or infected by mold. The tree doesn't create this resin when it's healthy. It creates it specifically in response to injury, as a defense mechanism, and the resin itself carries genuine antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory compounds, historically burned and applied to calm anxiety and support respiratory issues. Here's what most people miss. Balaam picks, of all possible comparisons, a tree that only produces something valuable because it's been wounded. He's standing on a mountain looking down at a nation that's just spent a year being tested, humbled, and struggling through a wilderness. And the image that comes out of his mouth, against his own paid intentions, is of a tree turning injury into fragrance. Even the curse that wouldn't curse them landed on the one plant that heals by being hurt first. Next, the final 3: pomegranate, wormwood, hemlock gall. Deuteronomy. 40 years after Egypt, and Moses is standing at the edge of a land he'll never enter, describing it to a generation that was mostly born in the wilderness and has never known anything else. Deuteronomy 8:8 lists what's waiting for them across the Jordan, a land of wheat and barley and vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of oil, olive, and honey. The pomegranate, Rimmon, closes out the list of promise, and it's not just symbolic. Its peel and juice are dense with punicalagins, among the most potent antioxidant compounds ever measured in a fruit, still studied today for cardiovascular and anti-inflammatory effects. The land of promise is described, quite literally, as a land of medicine. But Moses doesn't end on comfort. Deuteronomy 29:18 delivers a warning instead, cautioning against anyone whose heart turns away, lest there should be among you a root that beareth gall and wormwood. La'anah, wormwood, is bitter enough that its name becomes shorthand for suffering throughout the rest of Scripture, but it's also a genuine antiparasitic, a compound real enough that a version of it, artemisinin, is a frontline malaria treatment today. And roche, translated gall or hemlock, was almost certainly a genuinely toxic plant, used here specifically because everyone listening would recognize it as dangerous, something you'd never willingly plant in a garden meant to bear fruit. Here's what most people miss, standing back and looking at the whole list. The Torah's very last botanical image is a warning wrapped in the same kind of plant knowledge that opened the whole book. Genesis started with a resin nobody could quite identify. Deuteronomy ends with a poison everybody already understood. The same precision that named a mystery in Eden is still naming danger, 40 years and 5 books later, on the edge of the promised land. From a resin in a garden nobody had left yet, to a poison root at the border of the one they were finally entering, the Torah never once used a plant carelessly. 30 plants, 5 books, 1 woman, kneeling in a stone courtyard, grinding hyssop between 2 rocks. That's where we started. And now you know what that plant actually was. The same one that marked the doorposts on the last night in Egypt. The same one that let a person cast out with a skin disease finally come home. You know that the very first specific object the Torah bothers to name isn't a law or a person. It's a resin still sold in health stores today. You know that a fig leaf was never an outfit, that a mandrake nearly split a family in 2, that 6 spices built a pharmacy into the air of the tabernacle, and that even a hired man paid to curse a nation couldn't help comparing them to a tree that turns injury into fragrance. Here's the thing this whole walkthrough has actually been proving, one plant at a time. None of this was decorative. Every single herb showed up at the exact moment someone needed it, for a wound, a fever, a fear, a body being brought back from the edge of being unclean. That's not coincidence, repeated 30 times over 5 books. That's design. If this changed how you'll read the Torah next time, not just as law, not just as history, but as a text that was quietly teaching medicine the entire way through, that's exactly why this channel exists. Subscribe if you want more of Scripture walked through this way. And if one of these 30 plants is sitting in your kitchen right now, you're closer to that stone courtyard outside Jerusalem than you think. Before you go, 30 plants, 5 books, 1 afternoon. That's what you just sat through. Most people watching this channel are never going to do that. They'll watch something easier, forget it by dinner, and keep reaching for whatever's in the medicine cabinet the next time something hurts. You're not that person, or you wouldn't still be here. So let me tell you where the rest of this lives. The Rambam Healing Bible takes exactly this approach. Torah, Talmud, and the Rambam's own writings, cross-referenced against what modern research actually confirms, and applies it to over 60 foods and remedies, organized by what's bothering you, not by what chapter it's in. Joint pain, blood sugar, gut health, skin, sleep, the whole list. You could be reading the entry for your own body in under 2 minutes from right now, and when you get it, you're not just getting a PDF, you're getting lifetime access to the Rambam's inner circle, where new findings and remedies get shared every single week. Buy once, and you're in it for good. You already know what happens the second this video ends. The tab closes, and a week from now you won't remember the word Bdellium if your life depended on it. Don't let that be the outcome. Links in the description, it's pinned in the comments, or scan the QR code on your screen right now. I will see you in the next one.